Okay. Kim, hi, can you still hear me?
Yes,
Great.
yes, I can still hear you.
So I'm just going to say for the record that this is Melissa Ho interviewing Kim Jones on August 15th, 2020 for the Smithsonian Institution Archives of American Art Pandemic Project. And Kim, you're speaking to me from your home in New York City, right?
Yes, yes, my
Great.
apartment. Yes,
Well,
yes.
thank you so much for making time for this. Why don't we start with a simple question? How have the past few months been for you?
Uh, Stressful, but actually, I think each day I try to go out for a walk. Uh, Maybe half an hour to an hour. Sometimes I'll go out and sit and read someplace. Uh, I live in Stuytown, so it's slightly easier to walk. But the whole thing is the difference, of course, is I live in an apartment building, and so each time I go out, I wear a mask, I wear gloves, I am aware of touching things. I go on the elevator, aware of that, and then just aware of people as I go out, even though it's not quite as bad as being in the regular city, but still there's people walking around. Some people have no mask, sometimes there's kids with no mask, but grown-ups too, a lot of grown-ups jogging or walking. And so I'm more aware, making eye contact with people and staying a good distance if it's possible from them. So that can be stressful in itself, but I'm also when at first I was angry each time I walked by somebody that didn't have a mask on, but it's much wiser, I think, to try to control my anger and just sort of turn away and not look at them and make sure, if I can, to make sure I'm a good distance, which sort of saves me because I don't think, obviously it doesn't do any good to, rant and rave at somebody. It just makes them angry too. So that's part of living here. And
Yeah.
I'm very lucky, it's like my partner is younger than I am. So, she knows how to cook. And so if I was by myself, I'd end up getting takeout or whatever. And so it's a lot of stress on her too to cook every night. And but that helps too, and just also, reading. I've always read, but I've found in the last 3 or 4 months at least, I've read a lot more because it's almost like a way of escaping. It is a way of escaping.
Yes.
And I started out with more or less crime novels because it was slightly easier to read, more fun. But good writers though. Tana French, Faithful Place is one, and Kate Atkinson is another one. And from there, I went on and started reading George Eliot, Middlemarch, Jane Austen,
Classics.
and the classics, 19th centuries, Dickens, Bleak House. But before, like especially Bleak House, I remember before that, I was always kind of, I never could get through it. I was always a little in awe of just like, oh God, to read that because it's pretty thick. And also Middlemarch is like 2 volumes. I read that twice, but I surprised myself because just by sitting down and being forced to sit for hours and find something to do aside from making art, I got through those things. And like a lot of things, the more you do it, the easier in a sense it gets. And so I surprised myself, I think, by being able to get through these, whereas before, I read, but not quite this much. And I've read quite a bit actually in the last 3 or 4 months at least, maybe slightly more, that I've spent time here inside. I mean, not always inside. You know, I'll go outside, Stuyvesant town, to go to the bank or just get things done. But mostly, you know, it's being here, which is, you know,
Yeah.
as you know, it's yes. The other aspect of it is like, you know, being someplace which most people are having to go through.
Yeah.
So,
Have
and,
you been able to continue making any work?
not as much as I wanted to, but I mean, I have a show that's scheduled. Um, I think in November, but I've done a little bit, and I think it was mostly just because I was reading so much, but I've started making work again, like drawings,
Mm.
like in the last week or so, and all along I worked on my notebooks and smaller drawings, which is good, you know, and it just helps me. It's hard to. It's not quite the same as before, where I did a lot of work, but
One thing I was wondering about is does the current situation, how does it compare to, you know, I was thinking about the period you had as a child,
yeah,
being confined to bed or anyway,
yeah,
I think to home, right? Um,
yeah, yeah.
and
About
I
three
know
months
that
in the
that was
hospital. Yeah,
in the hospital and at home,
yeah,
recuperating. Um, does this compare to that experience in any way?
yeah, yeah. Actually, it does. That's I think, you know, when I was a child, you know, it was, I think, about 3 months in a hospital, children's hospital in LA, and then most of the time in my bed or in a wheelchair with braces. Uh, but at that time, you know, it's like I spent a lot of time uh, looking out the window at the
Mm.
trees, and but making up my own world, and you know, reading comic books and drawing cartoons, and basically this world that I could control, which is, I think I've talked about that before, and I think that's also, you know, even now, it's like the reading, I think especially, is a way of to retreat, and it's to hide, and but the intensity, because that's what I have, and
Yeah.
really, you know, going to the 19th century, which is, I'm sure they had their problems then too, but still, it's nice to go back there. But
So you're consciously been choosing literature that takes you away from the present moment.
more or less, except the crime novels are like 20th century mostly, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah, Jane Austen, you know, Dickens, you know. Uh, William Boyd is a little later, you know, and I've read a lot of him, but he mostly talks about, like, you know, the beginning of the First World War and Second World War. But also, I mean, the other slightly scary thing is I think about 2015 or so, 14. I read, there's a British philosopher. His name is John Gray, and he wrote a really good book called Straw Dogs. And it's about, he really goes after science, the whole idea in science that things will improve. I mean, it does a lot of great things, but the whole idea that it's going to make humans better in general.
Yeah.
But he also goes after religion, less so, but it's been a long time since I've read it, but I remember when I first read it, I didn't think he was also talking about microbes and how, it's a good possibility that nuclear war, this is all really kind of depressing stuff, but nuclear war would probably take out a good portion of our civilization. But he said most likely it would be microbes that would pretty much finish us off,
Yeah.
And I remember when I read that, it was before, there were SARS or all these other diseases that were going around, but they didn't really affect the U.S. or even the Western world. It was mostly, other places that, that we usually don't think too much about necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And now suddenly, the viruses are going around, and suddenly it's like we're right in the spotlight. It's like it's got us all. It's like it doesn't, it's happy to take care of all of us. And so we're right, obviously, in the middle of it. And so now instead of them, it's me, which is something we all have to face, right?
Yeah, it's really confronting us.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And
I think of you, Kim, as such a city person, walking around the city.
Right.
The conversations we've had have been in restaurants and walking.
Right.
And so are you really confining yourself within your neighborhood? Have you been, out observing people or staying away mostly?
Mostly I stay within Stuyvesant Town because it's like a big park. There's people out, a lot of people, but there's a lot of trees, so it's easier to walk. But I do every once in a while I go outside. It's mostly in the East Village area to go to the bank or go to the post office and just to get things done. And that's okay, because like usually, if I go at certain points, I'm able to avoid. There's a lot more people that are, walking around, especially without a mask, and so it's easier to walk across the street or to avoid them. But it's slightly more stressful, and I haven't gone uptown or any place. Mostly just like the East Village area, and I do miss. At first, I really missed because my whole routine, I met you at Veselka, that little restaurant, and I would go there every morning and read the paper and sit. It was like this thing that I did. And I really enjoyed, it was like that time in the morning where I'd spend a couple hours, and they were really great about that. They didn't care if I stayed there 5 hours, really.
Yeah.
And sit and just relax before I started my day. And then but I was surprised at how easy that was to just, because I knew I couldn't do it anymore, and so I stopped. It's the same with going to a bar every once in a while. Every once in a while I'd go to Velocis. There's like a couple of bars in East Village that it was pleasant to go there and sit in the late afternoon or at night, and can't do that.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect is smoking cigars. And I would, I got it down. I tried to be strong. I got it down to one cigar a day. And, I would not tell myself I'm not addicted, right? But, it was still this hunger for the cigar. And I stopped doing that almost immediately.
Oh, wow.
And I was actually kind of surprised. I have one cigar that I bought before this happened. And it's sitting on my bookshelf. And I have this desire to smoke it, but I understand, I could do that, but then it might kill me, because, it's respiratory, and it doesn't help to have, cigar smoke in your lungs.
Yeah.
With all this stuff going on.
Yeah.
And, And I see people out there, and it's a good way. I could see people in the city and just around here, having a cigar or a smoke, and I understand that, just to take care of the nerves. But
Yeah.
for some reason, I was surprised at myself that I was able to just quit, just like, okay, that's it.
Yeah, that is
And
amazing.
it wasn't a matter of strength. I think it was just like I realized, no, it's up to me.
Right. Sort of acceptance too, it sounds like.
You accept it. Yeah, that's just the way it is. So.
Yeah. Are you the kind of person who follows the news really closely? I don't know that you are, hearing you talk about how much reading you're doing. I think a lot of people during this, sort of shutdown period have been really glued to the computer or the phone, sort of
Yeah.
following the news. Are you immune to that, or have you
No,
become
no,
a version of that?
yeah. Well, that's what I mean. I've stopped buying newspapers too. So one thing, like in the morning, I'll have breakfast and coffee, and I look at my phone. Like there's the news on my phone, which I read, and that is really it can be a problem because it just does is make me more anxious. I try to control that too, because I know if I do it too much, it's like I can feel myself reaching for the phone, and this anxiety and wanting to know what's going on, and I'm trying to, I don't know, train myself in a certain way to just like a few hours or certain times that I'd look at it to make sure things are still there, and then try to not look at it, because I know if I look at it too much, then that also makes me anxious. And I think I've read also that people have talked about, that's a big problem with a lot of people, either reading mostly the computer, they're just going through the news and
Yes.
And it feels like you're doing something, and in a certain sense, maybe it is. Or if people are lonely, they want to hear somebody talking about things, they want to, sort of think, I'm not really crazy because that person also thinks the same thing, as depressed or whatever. But I understand wanting to do that, but I think I think it's better for the individual to try to control that if they can.
Yeah, it's tough. How do you envision your work? You mentioned you have a show in the fall. How do you envision your work as this crisis continues? It seems like we're not getting a quick resolution. So I'm just wondering, do you think the circumstances will be affecting or infiltrating the work you're making in the coming months?
I can't really see any effect that it's had on my work. I mean, I haven't done as much as I should, but
well, you have such
my work has always been kind of grim anyhow. So it's just like, usual.
Well, and as you said earlier, you have this very consistent sort of notebook practice and your drawings.
Well, I've gone, which is something I've always done anyhow. It's like I've gone through certain sketchbooks and redone them and sort of brought them up to date and actually made them into presentable art pieces, and which is good. And I don't know. It's difficult to explain, but I continue doing the work. I don't know when it's going to end. I mean, you know, it's hopefully we'll vote the clown out, and we'll have like grown-ups in there to maybe help us as real leaders.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But it's a scary situation, obviously, for everybody, for the world.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you know, yeah, I don't know. It's just really,
Yeah.
we just have to deal with it.
Maybe just one last question.
Yeah.
What do you think you'll remember most from this year? The circumstances of the pandemic, and of course, being in New York, I'm sure you can't help but be affected by the Black Lives Matters protests and so on as well.
Right.
I mean, what do you think you'll remember from this time most?
Well, I mean, it's the Black Lives Matter. It's just how, I mean, that's always been a problem, the racism. And it seems to me there's more people that are standing up to this and trying to, and actually doing something, and that's, especially younger people.
Yeah.
You know, it's really, I think it's great. It's, you know, that's because they're really doing something, even if it's, you know, marching or just doing something. And on a personal, you know, for me, I think I was actually, I mean, kind of surprised that I've been able to read so much. You know, I think it's just, and I think it's being forced to sit down for a few hours, and you know, it's like I'm so used to, you know, like the city, every 5 minutes get up and walk around, and you know, the city's, you know, there's people always around, and you know, and so this whole attitude is there's very few people walking around, and the people that are walking around you're afraid of in a certain sense because you don't know what they have.
Yeah. And
so you're aware of, you know, somebody walking towards you, even asking for change. You know, you don't want to get near anybody, and you know, and even if you know somebody, you're just like, my friend Megan is much more friendly when it's supposed to just people that live in the building that we know. But even then, you keep a safe distance. But you know, and so it's being forced to sit down and read, and escape, and which adds, you know, it's a terrible time, but that for me is a real plus. And I think that's probably one of the things I'll remember the most is it's a growing experience for me. You know.
I wonder how many pages you'll have read by the time we come to the other side.
This is, I'm trying to, because of Megan, you know, I'm sort of slack about all this sometimes, but I'm writing down the people, the writers that I've read. Oddly enough, mostly women, which is
interesting.
Really, yes.
Yeah.
Well, Hilary Mantel, Jane Austen, of course. Well, Raymond Chandler, but Dorothy Hughes, Kate Atkinson, Tana French. Tana French and Kate Atkinson's were the first ones that I read, and they're really good writers.
Yeah.
And it's mostly crime, all crime. But those were, I mean, I went through. I think I read them all twice, and then I started going into the more classic writers. You know, Hilary Mantel, Jane Austen, you know, Dickens, but
And are these books you already own and just hadn't picked up, or are you getting them from
I
the library or
I
ordering them?
I right before it started, I started because we sort of knew something was happening by around January when Megan, of course, was much more aware of what was going on. You know, we were going to go out to dinner, and we decided we had to cancel it because even then we realized we weren't wearing a mask, but we realized going inside of a restaurant was probably not a good idea.
Hmm.
And that's when the bookstores were still open. So that's when I bought a lot of these crime novels. And then because Megan's a real reader, we have, and I also have, like a lot of these novels. So just, you know, going through the bookshelf and
Yeah.
reading them.
Yeah.
And, you know, but yeah, and they're all, you know, the great thing for me also is just, I would always sort of, it wasn't anything but my insecurity about reading, you know. I've read, but it wasn't like, I think there was some part of me that was afraid. It's like drawing or anything, you know, the more you get past the being afraid of things and just draw. But I think it's similar to reading. It's like I was forced to read, and so the more I read, the easier it was in certain ways.
Yeah.
The more I wanted to read, actually, and a good experience for me.
Yeah, no, that's great.
You know.
Well, Kim, is there anything else you want to share for the record before we finish up here?
No, except it's really nice to talk to you. I've done most of the talking, but it's really nice to hear your voice.
It's really good to hear your voice too. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording, but I'm
Okay.
not hanging up. Just hold on.
Okay.
Hold on.